How are you guys? Good. I decided to be a little comfortable and plug my organization out, Adventist for Social Justice. um, this is going to be just a question and answer and clarification talk. So I love to just go straight into programs. I'm not into the singing. I think the church, we love to sing and we take a lot of time worshiping, right? And not dealing with issues. But just like, so we're just going to jump right into it. Of course, we're going to start with prayer. So I'll pray. Father, in the name of Jesus, thank you so much for bringing people out to get more understanding about this issue. Help us, heal us. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to just get a little bit more detail and then answer your questions about the different slides that I went with, right? So, and if you have questions, you ask the questions, and I answer the questions. Is that okay? Okay. So remember I was talking to you about these two brains there, right? This is a normal brain. This is a 3-year-old brain. They're both 3-year-olds. But look how small the cerebrum is. So the cerebrum is the part of the nervous system. Yeah. Yeah, I just did. Oh, okay. I was pointing to that one. So you see that? That's a big cerebrum. So if you look before, this is the development of the brain. This is the development of. Can you all see me pointing at this one? Can you all see me pointing at that one? Yeah? So I'm just going to stick to that one. So this is the first week of the brain development right here. So in 1 week, the first organ in the brain, in the body that's made is the brain. And so in 1 week, we have a fully formed something. It's not really a deep organ, but it's some kind of formation. And then that's basically 4 weeks. So in 4 weeks, we have an organism. It looks ugly, right? But it's something inside of the woman's body, and there's the brain. And then over time, if you see this blue part right here, that's the part that will become the cerebrum, right? So you see there, it's blue right there. What's happening is the big cerebrum is starting to grow. You see it? Growing more. This is before the baby's even born. And it's starting to, you see that little purple part right here that's inside? Can you see? Can you guys see? Okay. You see it's actually right there. It looks like it's little. It looked like it shrunk. But what happened was that the cerebrum got so big that it made it look like it shrunk. It didn't shrink. It's just that the cerebrum just got that much bigger. And then now you see it really, really big. It's the part of the brain that makes decisions. So the brain actually has 4 parts. It's not just one part. It has 4 parts. I didn't have this one in the slides, but, sorry. It has 4 parts. It's like this big part right here, that's the cerebrum, and then there's a little one inside, it's the diencephalon, and then there's the brain stem and the cerebellum. That's the brain. It has 4 parts. But the cerebrum is this big, large, folded part. Like usually when you see in the biology books or whatever, it's really, really folded. That's the part of the brain that makes decisions. The other part is, they call it the animalistic brain. So you know how animals, they run away from things at instinct? Right? They have a cerebrum, but it's not really that big. The difference between a human being and an animal is the size of the cerebrum. And so they have the front part You have the top part, you have the sides, and the back. So the part in the back is called the occipital lobe of the cerebrum. We basically see because of that. So when we take in information, we don't see with our eyes, actually. No, the eyes just take in light. We see with the back of our brain. So if we damage the back of the brain, even if our eyes are there, we won't be able to see. We don't hear with our ears. No, we don't hear with our ears. We hear with the temporal lobe, the side part of our brain, meaning the brain wave, the sound waves come through our ears. They're the receptors for hearing, but the actual hearing comes from the side of our brain. So if we damage the side of our brain, even if we have other parts of our ear in place, we won't be able to hear, right? We don't feel with our fingers, our skin. Like, when I touch something, I'm feeling with my brain. I'm not feeling with my fingers. I'm feeling with this top part of my brain, the cerebrum. So the cerebrum is what we call the integration. The sensory information is coming, but until I told you, remember I told you about the central nervous system? I make decisions about those things. It's basically, I would not be able to touch if it wasn't for the top of my brain. I wouldn't be able to hear for the side, see, taste. There's something deep into the cerebrum that I taste. I don't taste with my tongue. The tongue sends a message to the inside of my brain, the insula, and then I taste. So that's the importance of this growing cerebrum. Because it's the area that we actually do integration with. We see, touch, taste, feel with it. Now, I just told you the importance of a large cerebrum. That's why in the womb I tell mothers, go to full term, because the brain is growing its cerebrum. And the longer you go, the longer you give time for the cerebrum to develop inside. But it doesn't end that way, though. Because have you ever seen a horse or a whale get born? Never seen a horse born? You're not from the country, huh? City girls. When a horse is born, it comes out and just drops to the floor, and then just give it a couple seconds. It'll just start walking, right? Because, or a whale or whatever, or an elephant, because they have long gestation periods where the brain grows a long time in the womb. But babies, when a baby's born, does it just get up and start walking? It takes about what? Not even 3 months. Not even 6. A year. It takes a whole year to do what a horse did in a couple of minutes. Why? Because the baby needs his cerebrum to grow outside the womb. So that if you ever have they said, don't touch the soft spot, right? Because the skull is not fully fused. Why? Because it has to give the baby's brain room to grow outside the womb. There's some things that a human child has to go through outside the womb. All right. So it's so important that a baby's brain grows. And I just told you, look at the size of this cerebrum compared to the size of this cerebrum. You see the danger of not having a large cerebrum? I just taught you that, right? And this baby's cerebrum, 3-year-old cerebrum, is so much smaller than a same age 3-year-old that did not go through that terrible trauma of being stripped from their mother. And so when I see the when I see the thing that's going on in the border, you know, and now these children are being sexually abused, and nobody is saying anything. Not even the people who say they have the spirit of prophecy. When I look at the history of prophets, like, give me some prophet names. You know some prophets? Who are some prophets? Samuel, Elijah, Judah. You know what Elijah did? He rolled up to King Ahab. He said, "As the Lord liveth, there's not going to be no rain." Right? Like, prophets speak truth to power. Isn't that what prophets do? I've never heard of a silent prophet. But we talking about the Sabbath. When children being stripped from their, you're talking about the lamb-like beast? Oh, come to our home for freedom. And I take children from their mothers in slavery. Remember, you think the issues that we're dealing with just started now? It comes from slavery. They strip babies from mothers' arms in slavery. Just like now, they're stripping babies from mothers' arms at the border and giving them away to people. They're calling it adoption. I'm just telling you right here that an orphan who's been taken from their mother, that's what their brain looks like compared to one who has it. And then, remember I told you about the corpus callosum? That's the corpus callosum right there. You see that C right there? And then this is the corpus callosum. You see the difference? Thin. So, you ever had children with behavioral problems? And one of my friends, I was doing this on YouTube or something, and he reached out to me and he said his grandson is having issues holding his bowels, and they found out there was a disruption in their corpus callosum. And the way the brain works is there's something that we call gray matter, right? The gray matter is what we call the cell body of the neuron. Remember the neuron? This is the neuron right here. And this neuron talks to that neuron by sending neurotransmitters. So this one talks to that one. So the gray matter has all the cell bodies. The cell bodies. Right? And then the white matter has all the axon. So this is an axon. Basically, it tells messages to the other neuron. So what I'm telling you is that the cerebrum right here, that's gray matter. Gray matter. So it has all the dendrites, they're receiving information. But then they use white matter to send information and send it cross over to one side of the brain and send it downwards to the body. So imagine, this part is receiving sensory messages, and then the brain sends messages down the spinal cord out to the muscles of the body. So it's important that that white matter works because it's the sending part. Are you following what I'm saying? So if this is thin, then you're having issues in communication within the brain. So a lot of the issues that, like emotional, cognitive, social functioning, is coming from damaged cerebrum and damaged connection. All right. Any questions on that slide that you may have? This is question and answer. It's a little bit, yeah.
How come in the normal one, like the dark part, it's smaller, but in the second one it's bigger?
This one? Yeah. Oh, good. Yeah, girl. You want to be a neuroscientist? Okay. All right, so you see the holes, these dark parts right here? Those are actually what we call ventricles. Ventricles. So in the brain, the cerebral spinal fluid flows all around the brain, down the spinal cord. It's the very important nourishment of the brain. It has nutrients, it has buoyancy, it keeps flowing and the pressure properly in the brain. So what's happening is the ventricles are bigger. So there's an imbalance in the flow of the spinal fluid in that child's brain. So even those holes, though they seem bigger, they're not a part of the brain. That's an empty space in the brain that got bigger. Yeah, and a lot of people think that that can be an issue as well. Yeah. Yeah?
Can you elaborate on the notion that women use both sides of their brains?
We all use both sides of our brains. We all use the left side of the brain. The left side of the brain is the part of the brain that is heavily analytical. It has the language center in the brain. So math and analytical things are done heavily in the left side. The right side of the brain has a lot of the creative space. So the creativity, music. So usually we call it lateralization, like we use one side. Test. We use one side more than others. We use, like, we center in on one side more. So some people are left-brained and right-brained. But it's not that we only use one side. Both sides are in communication. We couldn't speak if we didn't use both sides of the brain. It's just that there's specialization where it's more on one side than the other. But I wouldn't say that women use both sides and men only use one. Yeah, no.
In terms of the brain, I guess the question I'm trying to get to is for us to understand, does the damage necessarily have to be something physical, or what caused this kind of damage? I mean, when we talk about like a trauma, we usually think about maybe like falling off of a tree or a motor vehicle accident or something. But obviously this is not the case, this kind of trauma that caused this reduction in the brain. So.
Yeah, so a lot of the times when you think of trauma, you think of, oh, I hit and hurt myself, I'm bleeding. But this is emotional trauma. And the same pain you feel when you're bleeding is messages of pain are being sent. But the problem is, usually when we fall and we cut ourselves, we bleed, we see the pain, we see the blood, we're like, oh. But emotional pain is harder to tap in, but it's doing something biologically to us, as we are starting to see. Keyword is, we are starting to see. You know, we're just beginning. And I want to say that I am a scientist, right? I am not a therapist. I studied the brain and the nervous system as a postdoc. So I don't have the foundational of therapy, but so all I can really tell you is what research is starting to see. And the thing about the brain is we really don't have a complete understanding. But this is powerful in of itself that needs to be brought forward. All right? Yeah.
Okay. Well, because I was discussing with her just before before this session. So the question you asked again about trauma and trouble and things like that, it doesn't really have to be physical. Because looking at my own cultural background, what we call trouble or trauma is not related to the English language at all in that sense. It means something that kills. That's what trouble means. Nsogbu. Trauma means nsogbu, something that kills, that mortifies the body. Mm-hmm. So it doesn't necessarily have to be physical. It could be emotional. That damage that destroys the body. That's what trouble means, or trauma in Igbo culture. Thank you
And
very
the
much.
danger is this stuff is happening within, and because we don't see blood, we suck it up, and then we try to get people to say, stop crying, just leave it alone, get over it,
Yeah.
because nothing's wrong with you. I don't see you making good money, you're eating, right? People, so it's difficult to face, but we have to face it. Yes.
Yeah. When we have a headache, I think they said that there's the
Pressure.
right, but because the brain itself, you don't feel pain from your brain itself. It's like the blood vessels and stuff that surround. Is that true?
So the pain, so the way that the body works is it's the brain is telling you have pain.
Pain itself from our brain. Our brain itself doesn't have pain. Is that true?
So to my point earlier is, you see how we don't see with our eyes? We see with our cerebrum. That's what I said, right? The eyes does not see. The eyes just sends a message, and the brain interprets it as vision. So if I hurt myself in my leg, I'm feeling pain actually in my brain. And it's telling me the problem is where? At the leg. And then it's like I feel like I'm feeling pain in my leg, but I'm actually feeling pain in my brain. And it's telling me, here's the problem. So the emotional seat in your brain is feeling pain. It's emotional pain, and it's trying to tell you you're feeling emotional pain right now. But you can't find it anywhere because you're looking for it, but it's inside, it's in here. Yeah, you feel it in your brain. You do feel it in your brain. Yes. Okay.
So when you were saying that if you feel with your brain, if you hurt your head while your leg was hurting, would you still feel pain?
I love that. That's beautiful. So if you damage your head and you damage your leg, you see that? Brilliant, right? Will you still feel pain? The answer is no. So there's situations where you can cut off your leg and you can't feel it. You know why? Because something damaged your brain. And remember, you feel with your brain, not your leg. Exactly. So if you have a damaged part, that's what when people get into a car accident, and it's not just the brain either, right? It's the brain and spinal cord. We call it the central nervous system. So the spinal cord controls a lot of the things. Well, it's a connecting link. So the brain decides to move, sends a message to your spinal cord, then the message sends from the spinal cord to your leg. But if there's a damage in your spinal cord, people get paralyzed, right? Not because they damaged their leg, but because they damaged their spinal cord. Because it's all about the central nervous system. So you got it. You got it.
When you damage your leg, if you don't damage your spinal cord, then you can still move. Right.
Oh, but hold on. If you damage your leg and you don't damage your spinal cord will tell your leg, other parts of the leg to move. It might be injured at first, but then as the muscles heal, you'll be able to move again. Because the leg matters too, because if the muscles aren't working, it don't matter if the brain says, hey, move muscle. The muscle can't feel it right now because it got damaged. So sometimes you need your leg too. But the foundation of it, the decision to actually move, it doesn't begin with your leg. It begins with your brain, yeah.
Now, is it true if one part of, say we have 6 senses, right? 6 senses, right? So if we damage one, is it 5 or 6? So if you damage one, does one compensate?
Okay. So, they say 5 senses, but they're actually 6. Okay, here they are. Number 1, smell, vision, hearing, equilibrium. Equilibrium, right? Taste and touch. So we leave out the equilibrium one, okay? Usually. We just equilibrium is, you see how I'm standing? I'm standing. In reality, I should be doing this. I should be swaying. Equilibrium means balance. That's right. So my ear does that as well. My ear hears. It hears hears sounds, but also there's messages being sent. So when I start you ever been on the train? I'm from New York, and people sleep on the train. You see it on the bus. What do they do? They start sleeping, and what happened? They start to do this. Do they fall over? No. What happens? They come back up. How do they do that? Like, I was on the plane at like 4 o'clock yesterday morning, and I felt so bad because I was knocked out next to somebody. I was in the middle seat, and I kept doing that. It wasn't, I was asleep. Okay? So how is it that I did that? Well, my ear felt me falling. It sent a message to my brain. My brain sent a message to my neck muscles, get up. Unconsciously. So the equilibrium is balance when it keeps my head steady. That's a sense. And to your question, do you have more? Yeah. So if you hear people when they go blind, right? They go blind. They have a better sense of hearing because the other senses are powerfully sending messages to the brain to overcompensate. Yeah, that's true. Or to compensate. Yeah, to compensate. Yeah. Question.
I have a question, but before I get to my question, I just want to mention another thing when we were talking about feeling pain in your leg. There are patients or people who have like their leg cut off and they don't have a leg.
That's right.
But they still feel pain.
That's right.
So
it's called phantom pain.
Yeah, phantom pain.
Why? Because remember I told you about the neuron? All right. So the neuron cell bodies, that thing right there. The neurons die if the cell body dies. That's why the cerebrum has all the gray matter, all the cell bodies. So you want to keep the cell bodies alive. You can cut the nerves. Nerves are axons. So you can cut that, and then the axon can grow back. So you ever think like temporary paralysis, meaning that damage happened at first, but they started to do it again? Well, that means that the brain cell didn't die. It just was damaged and was able to grow back. Well, the cell body for our muscles, that tells our muscles to move, is still alive in our spinal area. The axons may have been gone because the amputation, but the neuron is still sending triggering messages, and so it's like you feel your leg is there, it's not there, and sometimes it can be very painful. It's called phantom pain. Why? Because the neuron is still alive, even though the axons are gone. Yeah, and they're still sending messages up to the brain to feel pain. See? Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Earlier today, when you were doing your presentation, you talked about PTSD. There is this professor, her name is Dr. Joy DeGruy, and instead of PTSD, she says PTSD, but she calls it post-traumatic slave disorder. And she's saying if you have never, ever gotten, counseling, that all of the issues, because you say, well, we're living now, so what's the big deal about slavery? You're so far from it. That all of the issues from slavery that they had, you pass it down. And it's passed down. And if there's no counseling done in the middle, it passes all the way down. And so a lot of the behaviors that you see now are from.
Absolutely. Like, and we kind of like coddle it because we love our parents and we don't want to feel that our parents. But you know, the whipping with a whip, who started that? That's slavery. And we transfer, it's like, well, I got conversations today. People love coming. Well, my grandmother beat me, because I asked about beating, right, and grabbing and all that stuff. And you love your grandmother, of course, and you know you did it for her. But a lot of the things that happen to you in childhood comes from things passed down from slavery. And we coddle it. We coddle it because it's like, oh, well, it made me a better person. No, it probably made you a hard person. Hard, unbroken. And it's a delicate balance because I'm not saying I don't believe in spanking, but I'm not talking about spanking, though. I'm talking about abuse. Huh? I can't hear you. See, everybody's ready to come at me. Do I believe in spanking? Like, yeah. We like to quote those Bible texts. I think a lot of what our parents have gone through is abuse. It's abuse. And hold on. Listen. And it leads to emotional hardness. It leads to arguments, broken marriages, fights, drama continually. And we call it normal human behavior because we lived it over a long period of time. But trust me on that one. It comes from a place of abuse. And if we don't call it that because we're trying to save the honor of our family, it comes from slavery. Many of the behaviors, the seven, we say, oh, these men are really wrong for leaving their children, and the black family is what they say 70% raised by single homes, and it's not just a behavior that just happened today and back then it was so great. Men were running around on their wives in the 40s and the 30s too. Hello? Am I? Oh, but they stayed with the wife but the wife stayed and now they don't? Okay. Yes, ma'am. Yeah, okay. So back to my original point. The slave syndrome is actually behaviors that are passed down. And yes, we need to deal with it. But I think personally we need to make sure that we admit it's what it is. Yeah, we can't move on from PTSD, slave syndrome, until we admit that the behaviors that we call normal and godly are abuse. I'll leave it there. Hold on, I need to move. Yeah. So just to go into more detail of what I said here, I didn't go into great details of it, but this is, you remember the involuntary nervous system I was talking about, where I said, when you're in a stressful situation, you go through a fight or flight. Yeah, okay. There are different hormones that get secreted out. So the message is being sent. It talks to another gland, which sends another message to the adrenal gland, and it's something that we call adrenaline. And it releases adrenaline into the bloodstream. And the adrenaline makes your heart beat fast, your breathing up, remember? And it gives glucose, sugar, to your blood, to your muscles to move a lot. But if the glucose doesn't get used because really you're not really running away from anything, the glucose will stay or you will start to have issues with blood sugar, and then it starts to be transformed into fatty acids, and you start to have obesity. What is obesity? Obesity is too much fat in your body, right? Especially you see it here. You see it here, right here. And let me tell you the danger of this right here. Because what's usually right here is usually right here. So the larger this is, the more fat around this is, which leads to heart attacks. But this is a lot of the times made through stress. Why? Because not only it switches from adrenaline to the cortisol hormone, which is the constant state of stress. It's the constant state of stress. So usually when you have this, it's because your body is releasing so much cortisol into your bloodstream because you're so stressed that you live in a state of stressfulness, and you start to store up extra fat because of it. So not only do you store it, and what happens is you store it in the wrong place. You store it here, and you store it around your heart. So you're at risk of heart disease based on not necessarily the food you're eating. So you decide to stop eating bad foods, right? You accept the Adventist message and you don't eat pork no more. And you go all the way to veganism. You don't eat cheese, you don't eat nothing, and you still got this gut. How you still got the gut? You don't eat meat no more. How you still got the gut? You got the gut because stress is giving you the gut, not the food. But if you deal with the stress, hallelujah. What did I say? Deal with the stress. You remove the cortisol. The cortisol stops sending too much sugar in your blood, and you stop extra. You see what I'm saying? All right. Any questions on that one? Yeah.
Based on what you have just said, it seems as though based on what you're just saying about the cortisol, the building up of the cortisol, it comes two ways. Like if you're frightened and you're ready to run or whatnot, right? And also it can be built up from stress.
No, adrenaline. Okay, so there's adrenaline and there's cortisol. Adrenaline is there to get me to run. You're supposed to do that. You're supposed to be in fight or flight if a bear is chasing you, or if you start to exercise. Your sympathetic nervous system you start to beat, your heart beats fast. So there's nothing wrong with hearts beating fast and breathing heavy, but it should be based on exercise or some kind of imminent danger. But then if you live in a constant state of stress, it switches from the fight or flight situation to the constant state. You're living in a constant state of stress. And the problem with that is you're not usually doing anything. Usually when you run away, you take the glucose out of your blood, use it for energy, it's gone. But in this situation, you're not doing anything, so it starts to stay, and then it starts to transform into fat and get stored up. So so cortisol is constant state, which nobody should want to be in. And then there is the good stress where you should be in. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Dr. Maya, for your excellent presentation. I agree with you. Stress is, will also contribute to weight gain, but poor diet, high carbohydrates, like let's say the person stops eating meat, but they've increased their carbs, they're eating more sugar, that's going to add to the weight gain and lack of activity. So they're not exercising. So all those things. So remember our 8 laws of health. They all go hand in hand to make sure that we have, balanced diet, a healthy outlook on life, and that our body is in shape.
I agree, and I'm not saying you shouldn't get into your 8 laws, but I'm talking about what happens when you do all of that and you're still having issues. So it could be, to your point, you're not eating right, or you're not exercising. But there's a lot of people that are like walking a long time a day. Like exercise is not necessarily going to the gym, right? There's some people who are working all day long, like working and walking 15, 20 steps, 20,000 steps. That's enough exercise, even if you're not going to the gym. And still, right? So what I'm saying is, if you're doing all those things and you still have an issue, it could be that. Or it could be a combination. It could be a combination, yeah.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
My question is in relation to, at this morning, you did mention about teenagers and alcohol. I just want you to speak to that some more, so the teenagers could understand, the depletion of brain cells, and not only from a teenager perspective,
but the
can
parent.
you also talk about an elder, drinking alcohol and how it affects our brain?
Okay. All right. So I'll go back to this one. You see this one? You see this? Somebody call me? Okay. You see, I told you about how these are the neurons, the growth of the neurons. You see that? These are neurons. So they grow a lot to 2 years old. That's the high amounts of neurons. And then the adult brain actually has less neurons than the 2-year-old. Okay, that's what I was saying this morning. Okay. The process is that you grow past 2, 4, 7, 9, 13, and it's still growing. But then when you reach around adolescence, late adolescence, that's 17, 18, this slows down, but not just, the brain doesn't slow down in the growth, it actually starts to kill some of its own cells. It's called pruning. And so usually certain mental disorders, many of them which are biological, like schizophrenia, for instance, part of the brain dies too much. And so we just said that the brain is so crucial in helping to manage itself, especially its own emotions. If the brain dies too much, I gave the example about there's a part of the brain that you're constantly hearing things. They say, there's some studies right now that says that even our brain practices situations. So it actually hears things in a practice way. Like, let's say a gun goes off. What do we immediately do when a gun goes off? Rut down. So sometimes studies are saying, I'm not saying this is the case, right? Studies are saying that we actually hear guns going off. Our brain practices guns going off or whatever, rehearsing itself for the situation. But the important part of the brain tells the other parts of the brain it's not real. But what if the important part of the brain that's supposed to tell the other part of the brain it's not real starts to die? Then you start to hear the practicing events as if it's actually happening. So the imbalance of the brain death is so delicate during adolescence. That's why usually the mental illness happens in late adolescence, just naturally, genetically. But what if you start to take alcohol, and I guess the young people are over here. What if you start to take alcohol and drugs, right? You start taking the alcohol and drugs during the pruning period, which you're at high risk of because your forebrain is not fully developed yet to control it. So the forebrain usually when you get to a certain age, you're like, nah, that's not good for me, whatever. But when you're at a risky area, it's like you're trying any and everything because your forebrain is not developed enough to control the risk. So you're at risk of using drugs, alcohol. You are at risk of killing your already dying brain cells. Are you listening to me? You're at risk of killing so when you take alcohol, you binge drink. There's a study that we're looking at, that I read, where you take the young people who are binge drinking in college, they're seeing this damage happen. So you're binge drinking, or you're binge smoking marijuana, or binge popping prescription medication, you're damaging your already dying brain cells, and you might tip it to the scale of mental illness. That is the danger of using drugs, especially in your adolescence. Is that good enough? And then for the old folk, you're damaging your liver. Your brain is already dying because you're. So I always listen. I turned 40 in May. I tell my students this all the time. So there's a part of the brain, there's part of the skull. Remember I told you about the soft spot and how it's soft because your skull hasn't ossified yet. Ossification means get to become hard bone. But at 40, your last bone ossifies. So what does that say? So the reason why it wasn't ossified, because you were giving it room to do what? Grow, that's right. But then by 40, what happens? So then the brain cell, that's basically saying by 40, the brain goes from But what to the old folk is, you want to keep, so naturally your brain cells are dying. It's called the process of aging. Are you listening to me? It's just called naturally your brain cells are dying. But who wants to have fully dead brain cells when you're 80? Yeah, we call that Alzheimer's and dementia, right? So what happens is you got to try to take care of your brain as long as possible. You want to keep it healthy and alive as long as you're going to die. But it's really bad to be dead while alive. So it's not just alcohol, it's sugar, it's the food we are eating. We got to keep our brain cells alive. Yeah.
Can you talk about the notion that whether or not alcoholism can be hereditary? If your daddy was an alcoholic,
I don't know the answer to that. They say that the genetics is passed down, the addiction behavior, whether it's alcohol or whatever, it's passed down. We think it has to do with the brain. We're not sure. But a lot of it has to do with experience. We tend to focus so much on genetics when it's you watched your father drink for years. And you said to yourself, I'll never be my father. And then you drink. Because that's what you saw. You watched, I was talking to somebody else, and a lady came to me. She said, I said I wouldn't marry a man who abused me because my father abused my mother. And the first man I married beat me. And she said, because I didn't deal with it. I just said, I'm not going to be my mother. There was no tools. They did not take in any tools to come away from the experience. Yeah. Was there a question?
How do you take care of your brain?
How do you take care of your brain? You have a good diet, you eat well, you sleep well. You sleep 8 hours. You eat well, you sleep well. You pray to God daily, and you keep well of your brain. That's as simple as I can go. All right, so let's look at So I didn't go over this that much, so I'm going to just talk about it. So I told you they took the saliva of orphans, and they saw high levels, right? High levels of, let me see, oxytocin and cortisol. All right? Much higher levels of cortisol in children when they awake. So when you awake, you should have a certain amount of it because you're getting awake to have some, you're stressing yourself. But it was too high. But look at this one. This one is oxytocin. That's the bonding one, the one that involves mother bonding with the child. Look at it. This is what it should be, and it's much lower in the orphan. The orphan has issues with bonding. And so then they have social issues with other people. They have social issues with other people. Big time. And there are a lot of people, especially in our community, that grew up in group homes, right? Like group homes and orphanages that we don't talk about. Like, and after they grow up in group homes, they come and they come to church just like anybody, you know? But they were in group homes or foster care, right? They go through it. But look what happens. Some of them, the ones who have been in orphanages for a long period of time, like group homes, they somehow survive by putting too much oxytocin in their blood. So there's some situations where people manage. So there's a lot of people who've gone through trauma and they've managed. They look normal, and it's like, well, I'm fine. But I see it a lot in the Adventist church. It's just my opinion. You know, this rigid perfectionism. It's kind of quiet in here. And they call it godly. They call it godliness. That's what they call it. They call it godliness, but it ain't godliness. It's rigid perfectionism. It was quiet this morning, and it's still quiet. Rigid perfectionism. Give me an example. All right, let me get it. Just anybody that does anything wrong in the church, they go hard on them. You know, like they should. Extreme. They go hardcore. Dogmatic. Nothing to the right, nothing to the left. Just, this is the way it should be. Yeah. And so it comes from a place of having your ducks heavily in a row. Like a lot of the times she's like, you can't, you have to make the decision to do this, and this is it, and this is all that matters. I'm not doing nothing else. It's just rigid. Yeah, that's just one example. That's just one at the top of my head. You know, no cheese. I'm not saying we should be a vegan. We should be a vegan, but you won't be translated if you're not a vegan. Yeah, you never heard? I went to Oakwood, so I've seen it all. It's opinions. Yeah, it sounds like it's opinions, but where is it coming? Where is it coming from? All right? Obsessive Yeah, but you have something to say? Okay. Oh, it's obsessive compulsive. Do you know people who are obsessive compulsive? Like obsess over the same thing over and over and over again? That's okay. All right, so this one right here, amygdala. Did you understand that one, what I was saying today? All right, so the amygdala is the part of the brain that tells you to be afraid. Like if you were to jump off a roof or something, you shouldn't. Like you would run and then something would stop you. Don't do it, walk back. That's the amygdala. Well, that's really large in traumatized children. So imagine always being in a state of panic and in fear. That's what people are going through. Anybody had a question about the amygdala and social anxiety? So anxiety is a very common issue in our community. Did you know that? Yes or no? No? Yeah? Yeah, question.
I could cross the street, but the car was going to miss me.
And how old were you?
Let's see, maybe 10, 12?
Uh-huh.
Maybe 10, 11.
So when you're a child, so boys' amygdala are actually smaller than girls. So boys, you ever see mothers, the boy jumps off the bed, think he can fly? Yeah. Because his amygdala is not developed yet. His amygdala is not developed yet. So mothers, be patient with your sons. Be patient with your sons because their amygdalas aren't developed. And children in general, children both male and female, compared to adults, their amygdalas aren't developed yet. That's why I gave the example of Brianna jumping into my uncle's arms. It's just natural. Yeah, she was like 2, young. So when you get older, though, it naturally gets larger and developed so that you don't put yourself in dangerous situations, risky situations. But if it's imbalanced, then you're anxious all the time. And there's an issue in, people have panic attacks, right? Yeah, anxiety. And it's heavy in the community, but we call it, nervousness? The crisis is the nervous breakdown, but we don't want to get to the crisis. We want to just deal with the issue of just simple anxiety. Yeah, is there a question on that? Yeah. I don't know about that. I know that babies don't have a strong amygdala. Yeah. Okay, yeah. Yeah. So that's, I think the church really needs to deal with anxiety issues. Hello? Okay. You good? Any questions on that? Yeah.
I have some anxieties, and one of them sometimes is speaking, and when I come up there, and I can remember what's going on with my mind, because I'll have everything planned, and then I get up there, and it's like, and I don't care how many times I get up there, I still go through this, and I break out in sweat, or I forget what I was going to say, and it's just it's anxiety. I know it's anxiety, but it's also what's missing in my brain.
I don't know. There's nothing wrong with nervousness. If you're afraid of, if your personality is not one that goes up in the public and talks, you're gonna naturally have nervousness.
Well, I usually talk very well.
But I'm talking about like hardcore anxiety where you could not.
Froze.
Yeah, you know, when you are naturally in a state of peace, I'm not talking about, you know, being in public and
Okay,
you know,
okay,
I'm talking about when you're in a state of peace, but your pressure is high.
Okay.
You're in a state of peace, but your heart is racing. Right? There's nothing dangerous around you,
Okay, got you.
but you feel like you're in
trouble. Like
in trouble.
Like, yeah, okay,
Yeah.
I get you.
Yeah. Yes.
I'm sorry. I'm concerned that what you're saying is true. Mm-hmm. I think about that as far as my situation. Yeah, I am speaking, and it just came on. But I think about that because anxiety is a big thing, mm-hmm. and I think that I would like to hear the young people, the engaging with them because I know as a young person, when I was young in the AY, we were involved in the conversation that you're having, and mm-hmm. I just feel like it's more one-sided to me.
Okay.
I want to hear what they're saying about what you're talking about.
I don't like to. I think they're listening. I'm waiting for them to ask. I'm not going to put them on the spot. Are you guys listening? No? You're not listening? You're not listening over there? You are? Are you? Do you care about anxiety? You do? Do you think that's a? Do you think that's an issue that's in the church? It is. Mm-hmm. Do you think it comes from trauma in childhood? Yeah. Do you think that the old folk are in denial about?
Very much so.
Talk about, say, huh? So explain. Who has the gumption to explain why they feel that the adults are in denial?
It's the way they were raised in the Caribbean, period.
That's why they don't talk.
Yeah, go ahead. I thought you just said you want, wait, hold on. Exactly. Didn't you say you wanted to hear their perspective?
Exactly.
So you can't, okay, so we're going to create, you know the issue with the church that I feel? That this is not a safe space.
Yep.
We say stuff, and then because we disagree, we call it foolishness. I don't agree with that. She don't know what she's talking about.
Absolutely.
So what we're going to do is we're going to create a safe space. And sometimes it's difficult. Why? Trauma.
I'm not saying I don't disagree with what she's saying, but that's not kind of like my perspective.
Okay.
My perspective is like, it's not because of where they were raised, it's that the mind isn't open all the time to like different ideas. That's what I see.
Okay, he said it's not maybe basically the way they're raised, it's sometimes their mind is just not open for whatever reason. Yeah.
You have to have a relationship with your children. You have to sit with your children. I do that sometimes when they were younger and put them around the table and say what you have to say, no consequences. And listen to what your kids have to say. And know what's going on around them. It's not a matter of we're not open to what's going on. We see what's going on. And some of the things that is going on, we already went through it. So we don't want our children to go through that. So we are trying to protect them. We see a lot of stuff. My kids do stuff that I never did. I never even think about doing. And it's not because some things they see in the household, because they're friends and peer pressure. So, you have to sit and you have to know your children. And you have to talk to them.
Agreed. But anybody has anything to say over there? Remember, we're making this what is this? What is this, everybody? Okay, so listen to me. Listen. The foundation of a safe space is when somebody says their thought, there's not a mist of grumbling. See, just to let you know, when there's a midst of grumbling, when somebody said, that's not safe. And so that behavior, trauma. I'm serious. Listen to me. Everything that we do is coming from someplace. We might not think it is. And it's habitual. And I won't say that. So even the midst of grumbling is not healthy. All right.
So I feel as though a lot of the times when grown-ups are talking to you, they have the best in mind or whatever, but there are topics that they will brush aside and say, oh, it's not that important and stuff like that. And later on in life, it can build up to be like very traumatic. Like, that's what I think.
One more time. We gotta make a... Yeah, hold on. So they ask, can you give an example? Can you give an example of something that gets brushed away? 1 second.
Like, for instance, you'll say that you're stressed, and they say, what are you stressed about? You do not have to pay bills, you do not have a job, and etc.
All right, so but you see this. Let me tell you something about what I've seen, and I've done this before. Okay, what I've seen is people don't want to address painful experiences when they're not ready to face their pain, right? So I've heard that before, not even just as simple as you don't have no problem as a kid. In general, like, what are you crying for? Get over it. Move on. Have you ever heard that before? It's been 20 years, right? So that's a common, when people don't want to talk about your stress, they'll say, well, you're just a kid, you don't have any stress. That's what she's experienced. I'm just going based on experience. Like, if I don't want to deal with your issue, are you listening? I need you to listen to me. Hi, what's your name? Shanice. Yeah. So a lot of the times, if they don't want to necessarily deal with what you're talking about, maybe they'll just brush it off because they don't feel as stressful as probably what they're currently experiencing. What if they're currently trying to pay the bills? What if they have no money in the bank right now and they have to find rent that day? There might be stress for them, and for you to talk about your stress, it's like it's nothing compared to my stress. You know, so sometimes that usually can be, I'm not saying that is the reason, But I tend to, when people are feeling their own kind of thing, they don't want to hear about anybody else's kind of thing. Or if they're trying to mask their own abuse, I've seen this before as well. 1 in 4 females get molested in and outside the church. Ain't nobody talking about molestation. Ain't nobody talking about it. Parents aren't talking about it with their children. I mean, it's happening. And a lot of the times, if you want to be real, it's because they themselves probably went through molestation. And if you don't want to face your own molestation, you're not going to talk about somebody else's molestation. And the problem continues. Like, do you know that's a problem inside and outside the church? Okay, so, yeah. But it seems like it's just, nobody's really, it's getting swept under the rug, no? Yeah, it's big in the news when it comes to Catholicism, right? But, okay, it's everywhere. It's everywhere. Somebody has their hand up? Yeah.
So, what about when your parents, they ask you, how was your day? And then when you actually tell them, you're not even listening to you at all.
Okay, so that was a young person's perspective. Some young people say they ask how your day was, but truthfully, they're not listening at all. Or like I asked today, I was like, don't say what happened, no, what's wrong with them, say what happened to you, right? Somebody told me today, it's like, don't even, make sure when you ask what happened to you, you're actually willing to listen.
Amen.
So you can't just say what happened to you and then just walk away. There's some situations that are so heavy that everybody won't be able to deal with the issue. So when I say what happened to you, I'm not necessarily saying ask people what happened to you. I'm saying in your mind, don't judge them in your mind. Say in your spirit, man, what happened to them? Don't go to them and say that. But if you do go, make sure you're prepared to handle the things that they're going to say to you. If you're not, you may not want to jump there. But definitely if you're dealing with your teenagers, if you're asking them what their day was, you may want to sit and listen to them.
Yeah, just 2 incidents, personal incidents that happened recently that kind of addresses this and put in perspective. Both of them with my youngest son. One was, I guess about 2 years ago, he was in an accident. And immediately I'm thinking, bottom line, insurance, deductible, did he do something wrong? Because he's young and he's a young person driving. Did he do something wrong? Immediately my judgmental instinct jumped in. And so my questions to him were, how bad is it? What's wrong with the car? And then he got upset with me because of the way I was questioning him. And he said, Dad, you didn't even ask me, am I okay? And he started to cry, and then I started to cry too. Because from my perspective, I saw things in a certain way, and I did not see it from his perspective. The other situation was, I think we were in some conversation. I think his mom was there too, and the same thing that Shanice brought up is we assume that we have big stress, and their stress is nothing in comparison, or could never be anything in comparison to our stress. But it's contextual. My stress is within my context and my framework. Their stress is in their context and their framework. And so to put their stress, compare it to my stress, it's not fair. You have to compare what they have to deal with their capacity and what I have to deal with my capacity. So we need to put ourselves in each other's position and not judge each other based on our own position. And sometimes we as parents and we as adults can be extremely judgmental because we're seeing things only from our perspective and we're not seeing things in their perspective. And we need to apply ourselves to their perspective and be empathetic, being able to put ourselves in their shoes and deal with them on that level.
Yeah, it's the power of empathy. Yeah.
I just wanted to say, because you were talking about the brain, you know, what happens with stress, cortisol, and so forth.
And trauma.
Yeah,
emotional
and
trauma.
Yeah. We understand that babies are born with a lot of empathy when they start out. So how does that work? Because I know that they are, as time goes on, parents have to create an environment where they keep the empathy in them, or it grows into helping them socially and emotionally develop. And I find that a lot of times when you look at young children as they're growing, the empathy has dissipated. The way they treat each other, the way that they think about how they're going to engage with each other, it changes. So how do we keep the empathy? Because we need that.
I don't know the answer to how or if who has more empathy. What I do believe is that children are more emotional. They're very emotional. And over time, they take control of their emotions, right? That's just natural, right? Just take control. However, if there's something that's traumatic happening to them in their childhood, sometimes they can become hardened to their emotions, where it's difficult to empathize. I don't know if it's born with empathy and then it's going away, but I believe that when you have issues with your emotions and it becomes hardened, you have difficulty relating to other people socially, literally because of what's going on with the hormonal and just trauma in general in your brain. That possibly, right? So this is just scientific data to already say what we know is probably naturally happening. We use words like empathy, but I believe that I'll give the example of hypervigilance and punishment, right? Hypersensitivity to punishment, heightened shame. These are things that they're experiencing. Hypervigilance, meaning sometimes you have people that they literally do the same thing over and over and over and over again, right? Just anxiously doing it. Depression, anxiety, and it's all based on experiences that literally is going on in their mind, subconsciously. And it can lead to good things, like hypervigilance can lead to a successful career, a successful job, college experience, but it's still imbalance. You could be a really good leader. You could be a really, really good leader, but it's coming from a place of your imbalance. And so I'm saying sometimes people feel that because things are successful, right, based on issues, like they're literally battling, or we call it resilience. They're going through a state of resilience to make it, but they're doing it in a way that can be good, great, or can be bad. And so when I say things like perfectionism and hypervigilance and obsessive compulsive, that transfers to the children, and they feel anxious. Like, do you understand that Generation Z are killing themselves at rates way above anybody else? I just think, I don't know if the church really pays attention to it, and if we're really combating it. Like, I feel instead we kind of turn on each other versus combating the issue at hand. Did I see any hands back there? No? Okay, yes.
So you're talking about the church not paying attention. I'm not so sure it's that they're not paying attention. We don't deal with issues in our church. We don't talk about issues. So when you see something where an Adventist child took their life, which happened, I think, sometime last year, one of the schools, one of the kids committed suicide. It's like this humongous shock to us. And it shouldn't be, because it's happening. We just don't deal with, we like to, like you said this morning, you know, we have the message and we are supposed to know what we're supposed to be doing and we're supposed to handle things and it's okay. We don't talk about things. We don't seek help. We don't go to counseling. We don't go to therapy, because if you go to therapy, then of course there's something wrong with you. And if there's something wrong with you, then there's something wrong with the church. And I think what happens is a lot of things get bottled up inside, and we're taught to deal with them ourselves internally. Yeah. So like you're saying, you ever see people talking to themselves, like talking through issues? Yeah. And I was at work the other day and found myself talking to myself through an issue. Yeah. You know, and you kind of say, okay, it's normal. It's the way, I think we've normalized toxicity. Exactly. So instead of saying, you know what, I have an issue, and I need to find somebody that I can talk to about it. And if it's not a spouse or a parent or something, if you step outside of that circle, then there's got to be something wrong with you, with the person, right? And I think a lot of our kids are now realizing that there's nothing wrong with going to therapy. There's nothing wrong with going and talking to somebody just outside of your comfort zone, someone who can be objectional. Because my child may come to me and talk to me about something, and because it's my child, I'm not totally objectional about it. You know, so I think as a church, we need to start learning how to talk about issues, not in a judgmental way, because we're good at that, but in a way that fosters that sense of, like you said, that safe space where I can say something and I'm not judged on it. And that's what happens to our young people, is that they start talking, and because we know so much, you know, whether it's intentional or not, we can be very judgmental. They shut down. So then the cycle never ends.
I'll give you an example. There was a situation where a young man who was a homosexual in my church came and said he's struggling with homosexuality. Okay? It was a AY like this. And I remember this young boy. It was a young boy. And do you know what the church did? They gathered around in a circle, and they started to try to pray the demon of homosexuality out of him. That's how. And my church is liberal. All right? I remember him when he was young, and I saw the homosexuality show up in him. Listen to me with this. I saw it. And you know what we did? Nothing. And a high percent of homosexuality in males, you know where it comes from? Hello? Confused? No? Oh yeah, molestation. Molestation. So we saw molestation happening in this child, and we said nothing. And now he's 20s, struggling with homosexuality and suicide, and he comes out to us and tells us something that in reality we probably really knew, but we cast out demons of homosexuality. The biggest thing that we preach, for instance, we preach against homosexuality, and we say God made Adam and Eve and not Steve, and we don't deal with the issue that causes homosexuality. And we watch them as children grow up in homosexuality, knowing that most likely, not always, I'm not saying always, but most likely they're being molested. And we're silent in the church. So we're not dealing with issues.
What do you mean what you expected? What do you mean?
No, a child is being molested. An adult is struggling with homosexuality. A child is being molested.
Yes.
We can't tell, but we might want to start asking some questions. We might want to start asking some questions, Elise, but we can't sit silent.
I agree with you, but when we start asking the question, then we get shut down.
Keep asking the question. Save the child. Because we're quick to judge them in their 20s. We're quick to talk about them in their 20s. We don't stop talking. We don't not talk about them in their 20s, but we keep silent in their 40s.
So you're saying that you just said that
me, Maya. I watched him, so I'm not even talking about anybody. I know.
No, you're saying that most of the time that when young men struggle with homosexuality, it's mostly because they have been molested
as children. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'm not saying 100%, but if you talk to homosexual men, they'll say they were molested as children. They'll say it. I'm sorry. I'm not gonna. No, but that's an issue, Auntie Dawn. That's an issue. That's an example. You were looking for examples. That's an example of silence in the church with trauma. Yes. I'm pretty much almost done. I have one more slide and I'm done.
I just wanted to speak to the part about the church praying.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want us to minimize the power of prayer, which I don't think you're doing, but I just want to say that prayer is very important. That's part of the recovery, is praying. Now, when that child was growing, of course, intervention is important. If someone saw something, yes, intervene and get help. But when the church comes together as a body to pray, that's powerful. And in addition to that power that we have as far as praying, there's also counseling the child.
Let me tell you something about a homosexual coming to the church and telling them they're struggling with homosexuality. When he felt the people come around him and pray, it made him feel that he was demonic. I'm not saying don't pray. Hear me out. I'm saying what we naturally do as a church to combat everything is we come around in circles and try to sound holy, and we don't deal with the issue practically. And I'm saying the church needs to start dealing with issues practically and stop over-spiritualizing, because I personally believe that it is religion as a drug, not using it as godly prayer. Because they really don't, what they were trying to do was shut him up in a spiritual way. We're using religion as a drug to mask the pain, versus what religion is supposed to do is to talk about the issue that caused it and have power to change it. But what we're trying to do is like weed. We feel the pain come up. What do? We put the weed in our mouth to numb the pain. And when we use prayer to numb the pain rather than transform the mind, it is a drug, not religion. That's what I believe. That's what I believe. Yeah, so there's nothing wrong with prayer. I believe in prayer. Trust me on that. I prayed all day through the process. But I think that we're not practically dealing with problems. We're trying to pray the gay away. Yes.
We're saying we, but I think anything that we have to do with any of those situations, God has to have a part in it, because a lot of these things we can't do of ourselves, because when we put ourselves in it, then we will make mistakes and we'll do a lot of things that you're saying we're doing. So the basis is that God will be the one that's going to lead, and that's where when we pray, we're talking to God. So I think that that's our only way we can do it is through God and the Holy Spirit, because we can't do anything of ourselves. So sometimes we have to take ourselves out of it and let God lead the way. That's basically what I would like to interject there.
Hi, I totally agree with what you're saying. My understanding is we can't conquer what we don't confront. So sometimes it is good that when you look at the child, when you look at the child from birth, or when they're growing, and as you gave the symbols, how we are to protect their minds, and as when they're out of balance, that they cannot control themselves to make the right decision until they get to the age where everything is at peak, when they can or when they cannot. How to save them before they get to that point. So when we see these things at your church, I too have the problem with the rigidness of church folks, church people, us people in the church, or parents, that sometimes children are going through stuff, whether the struggle is sexuality, homosexuality, or even a 13-year-old girl is telling us she wants to have a boyfriend. We're going to tell her, go sit down. Go over there and sit down. What you talking about a boyfriend? What you need a boyfriend for? Because they're not listening, and I'm not.
You don't need a boyfriend at 13. That's the truth.
And that's absolutely true. They don't. However, rather than sitting her down, or the young lady or the young man, and say, "Come here, we will talk why we're saying you cannot have a boyfriend at 13." We have to start talking to our children. And for the kids who are seeing Caribbean parents, I will speak on this behalf, that let us give the Caribbean parents a little lineage, because we're from another country and our parents have no idea of some of the things that is now happening. They're totally oblivious of all of it. So you too can help to teach your mom or your dad, and just be polite and talk with them so they can hear you.
Are you listening?
You know, talk to your parents, have respect for them. We know that they're not illiterate, or how some of us might think when we're kids, but they are from a different world and era. They don't know a lot of the things that are being exposed to children these days. They don't know. So just be polite, find a good time, and sit and talk to your parents. You have an uncle, you have an aunt, you can come to. And the last thing I will say, I'm not a mother, but I'm an auntie at heart. And my sister Marcy would tell you, I am a detective on all the kids that's raised. I'm not known to be I am the kind aunt who give them this, but I'm like the detective, because I see everything.
Gotta ask questions.
Yes.
You gotta ask questions.
Right. I see everything, and I'm not afraid to tell her. And they sometimes say, "But Auntie Donna, not my mom." You're right, I'm not your mom, but I see. And but what I don't do, I will always do it in the right way that I think will help in these days. And I see it work perfectly. So pay attention. And don't be afraid of them, but don't scare the kids away. Okay.
Okay, is there a drug abuse problem going on in the church? That's a question I have. Is there a drug abuse problem going on in the church? Yes or no? How many of you say yes? How many of you say no? Okay. All right. So the majority of the church, I'm talking about this church, I'm not talking about the church in general, I'm talking about West Church. Okay, I'm asking your opinion. Do you think there's a drug abuse issue going on in West Church? Yes? How many of you say yes? How many of you say no? Okay, so that's a good question. Am I talking about drugs? I'm talking about anything of chemical substance used to numb pain in a toxic way. In a toxic way, like, over substance abuse, drugs, alcohol, opioids, pain medications. Yes. Yes? Okay. Well, so here's the foundation of it, right? A lot of it has to do with numbing pain, many of which come from trauma. We believe that's an issue in the church. How many times do we have, or what are we doing about it? I guess that's my question. What are we doing about Listen, it's a natural, trust me I want you to understand that I love prayer. I love prayer, I love Bible study. I have a Sabbath school program at Friday nights. I'm a praying person, and I've read the Bible from cover to cover 2 times. I've read all of Ellen G. White's personal writings, except for in the process of Ministry of Healing. All right? I'm a born, bred, hardcore Adventist, educated from elementary school all the way to Oakwood. Okay, so it's not that I don't believe in that kind of stuff, but I think we're imbalanced. We're imbalanced. We have an issue with drugs in this church that majority of you say we do, and we're not facing it. Why? Because that's what we do. We numb pain, sometimes with religion.
So I just want to educate some of us parents, because I too have an experience that sometimes we throw it out there that if drugs is in the church, but I want to tell you that sometimes it starts in our very schools. So you have a child going to school, and when we are back home in Jamaica, you'll have I'm going to talk colloquial now. You said, the boy that don't see or the girl that does not learning. In America, they don't say that. You're not learning, then they're going to call in the psychology, and they're going to bring in the parents, and they're going to say to you, we think this child needs some psych evaluation. And they frighten you because you don't understand. I am only speaking of this from a nursing point of view, because I happen to be a nurse and I work in psych also, and I happen to work with children who they threw into psych because for many, many different reasons, where I think that some of these kids, all they need, as you say, parents should listen to them, find out what the issues are, what is going on, because there's a whole lot of issues that they would talk to me about as a nurse, but they're not telling their parents, because I said to them, did your mother know about this? No, my mother doesn't know. But they're in there suffering, and they're giving them a whole lot of medication that is not necessary. You're getting Depakote, 1,500 milligrams of Depakote to that brain from a 13 and 14-year-old child. Do you know what that does to the brain? It changes the very chemical makeup of the brain. And that brain will never come back, because psych patient doesn't get better. You don't get better from psych, no matter what nobody tell you. Mental health in the school. Think about it, parents, when they call you in and they say just a little bit of Ritalin to take the edge off, or the Adderall or Concerta, and it will help the child learn. You tell me, if you cannot do anything for this child who is okay before they start taking the drugs, you think that when you start taking that medication, it's going to be better? No. Remember that the school benefit from, depending on which school, from that money. When they are diagnosed with a psych, and before you go there, you have to have a devastating diagnosis, like suicide attempt, you're going to blow up the school, or something bad before the insurance will even consider your case to admit you in the psych. And most of it is a lie, because they have to tell a lie to get you in. So be careful now When your kids go to school, and it's the substance abuse start from there, because they're just gonna graduate step by step to a more harsher medication. So remember.
Yes, I'm in total agreement. Ritalin is just a lower level of cocaine. That just lets you know what it's doing the same thing, and it's really training our children to do that. So I'm totally in agreement. And I do think that can start it, but I think most substance abuse starts in childhood by choice. They start to smoke weed, to numb. And they develop a habit when they're young that is hard to overcome. So I guess my question to you guys is, knowing that there's a drug problem, or maybe not knowing, but assuming or thinking that there's a drug problem, we as a church may want to address the problem. And I'm not taking God out of it, but I think God is calling. God brought me here I really believe God told me to bring this presentation to you guys, and He's telling the church, I really believe, that you guys need to deal with the issues that are popping up. We can blame there's issues that our children are facing. Then they go into their adulthood, and then they leave the church, and we think it's just because they're not primitive godliness. Like, there's no primitive godliness in them, and that's not it. They've been there's issues that they're facing, and they get caught up with numbing themselves with alcohol and drug use and prescription medication. I'm just letting you, yes, ma'am. And I see young people, trust me, I'm watching people, and I see young people shaking their head. Yes, ma'am.
There was
No, I believe Ritalin is an issue.
No, I'm not.
Yeah, okay.
Ritalin is an issue. I'm talking about something maybe different.
Okay.
And maybe even Ritalin is included, but I don't know if I want to include Ritalin. But anyway, it was his physician, because they do have a big opioid problem.
Mm-hmm.
And he was saying, well, we give opioids to so many people who don't get addicted. So now they've done study to see why are so many people getting addicted and others aren't. He said the reason that you get addicted is because you have something that he called a hook. Mm-hmm. And that hook inside of you makes you get addicted. So that hook is the trauma that you have. Mm-hmm. So now if you have a trauma in you, you may start off with drugs for fun, but that trauma will hook those drugs and move you on.
So you see that picture right there with the red? That's the hook.
Yeah.
You already naturally have a propensity of overactivated dopamine based on your trauma.
Right.
That's
and I'm just saying that's what the doctor was saying. Because they're saying, we'll stop giving people opioids. And he was saying that a lot of the drugs, it's the hook that people already have
inside
of them.
Yeah, so that's the danger of, like, if you've went through a lot of trauma in your childhood and you start using stuff, it may hook you more than someone who did not have that trauma. And then never mind the things that they're lacing the chemicals with in themselves. That all in of itself causes natural brain trauma. All right, guys, so my advice to you is to deal. My advice, I'm closing right now, that's pretty much it. My advice for you is to deal with it.
Oh.
Auntie Dawn, you want to say something? Any more questions? I'm pretty much finished.
Your advice is taken well, but over the years we have actually discussed several of these topics on Leave It Open-Ended. The drugs, the homosexual, we have had numerous AY programs and different things where we do address these subjects. We have done it. But we leave it open-ended because if there's an issue we don't know, because no one come out and say, Well, a couple times there were individuals who said that, but we leave it alone because we're not psychologists, and if we go and try to solve it to them or go to them and talk to them without the permission of their parents or anything like that. So we have dealt with these issues in different discussion and just like in a forum like this over the years. So moving on, since we have done that and we're like beating a dead horse, where do we go from here when the person or the individual who have these issues is not coming and say, they may come to me or other people and speak to us about it, and we can probably show them where they can get help, pray for them or encourage them or talk with them. But moving on from there, how do we address it? Okay, we speak about it in this forum, as I said. Now, okay, so now how we go ahead and deal with individuals who have the problem, who is not asking us for help or don't say they want help, we just know about it.
How about what we could do is we could start a Narcotics Anonymous meeting right here at West. We can hire, we spend the church, I'm not talking about you guys, we spend a lot of money on stuff that don't matter as a church, right? We can hire, or we can just, are there any counselors who are trained in this church who are willing to start a Narcotics Anonymous? If there's not, then maybe we can hire one where we can actually have all right, so you're in the process of training? Okay. So if we could get a group, maybe it's one that involves a licensed social worker, a licensed therapist, a psychotherapist, and create a group in the church.
But there again is the trust and confidentiality part of it.
No,
too,
but that's
always an issue. So
hold on.
It's a whole lot of things
You
to
just
go through.
select.
Yeah.
So no, I'm giving you an example. Somebody who is trained will obviously do this. They will create a safe space. They will have, like, they're literally starting a Narcotics Anonymous or Alcoholics Anonymous. They will have to abide by the rules of that. So of course. But that there are many churches, especially the ones that we condemn for having the mark of the beast. They have stuff in the midst of their rooms.
And I do believe Adventist Church does have it, but maybe not this. We don't have it, but we have churches that do have these programs. I do think they have these programs.
I'm trying to explain to you.
Are you saying that no Adventist church have these programs? No,
I am saying that we don't. If we have it, we don't have enough, and it's. Okay, is there an Adventist church in the Philadelphia area with the Narcotics Anonymous?
Not that I know.
The Philadelphia area? That's like...
But I'm not saying they don't, I just don't know of it.
No, the Adventist church, we used to, back in the day, have 24/7 activities for the community. When I say back in the day, I mean way back in the day, right? And we come away from that. And I'm saying we don't have a lot of it. I'm a part of Adventist for Social Justice. We literally search for churches who have it, and it's very far and few between. And if it is actually not even the conferences where it's usually the state conferences, churches that have that. So I'm telling you, it's a problem. We say, we don't know. I'm telling you, it is a problem. We don't have Narcotics Anonymous, Alcoholics Anonymous programs in our church. So there's divorce care. Have you ever heard of divorce care? That's actually an Adventist, not Adventist. They have churches that have that. They literally have therapy sessions for people who get divorced and their children. It's called divorce care. We can do divorce care. We can have Alcoholics Anonymous. So these are examples of things the church can literally do, put their resources towards it to literally deal with. And I promise you, people come to, Patmos had divorce care. People, women, men, they come to divorce care and they have the talk, the confidentiality talk. Yeah. Anybody else? 1, 2? And then we close.
Pastor Talfera has talked about the opioid addiction here in this area. He has talked about starting the program here.
Okay, good. So you're in a process. I just want, let's talk more action.
Yeah.
We talk a lot. We're good at talking. Adventists are good at having communications. You're good. Yes, ma'am.
Yes. We years ago, there were a group of young men in this area in the churches who started a drug program. What they were, and it's a lot in my mind, that the support that they were to get, they didn't get from the church because the information was not disseminated from the leaders in the church because of the way members always look to the pulpit.
Yeah, usually.
Okay. So the support was not there, and it was not there in the conference. We had a group of people who continue to try to push the program, even through prison ministry. It's unfortunate because you were talking about Alcoholics Anonymous, but what we thinking about is that we need help too.
That's what I'm talking about. I'm talking about.
Would be Nor Anonymous. So what happens is that we are always thinking about, well, we got to help our children, help people in the community, whatever, but the help that we can to help encourage us to do what it is that we need to do, because it is very serious. And I don't think to the extent that people understand addiction. Now, I just felt like we keep talking about stuff, but we had the opportunity to have already been involved in the groups and so forth. And I just think that what you're saying, I see the revitalization of progressive young people trying to do this in churches. And I'm going to fade out what's in the background to me, because I know that you care. I see that you very care and you're very serious. So I'm just saying to you that I look at other churches that are models of what we could do when we talk about counseling and so forth. There are churches that have people who have focused into do this in their church, and they make it very clear that they do it. They go online, do this and this kind of thing. So West Church to me is very great. They can do these things that you're talking about.
Yeah, and when I say anonymous, I literally mean it not necessarily for the community, for people here.
Oh no, I'm talking about us.
Yeah, us.
Because we are dealing with addiction, even food addiction.
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah,
so
there's actually one for food as well. Sorry, you guys are scared. All right, so to your point, I feel like we can create programs that actually deal with. I don't believe forums like this are dealing with the problem. No, this forum is to make you aware and come out of the state of denial that there's a problem, and now get some resources to actually create programs that deal with the problem. That's what I'm saying. Yes. Absolutely, you would have to, and that's where the spiritual gifts and training comes into place. So those of you who are trained professionals, I pray that you feel the calling of the Holy Spirit to actually start something here, or find someone who is trained. Yes, I'm not asking anybody to just come and start a program, but the motivation should be, we need to find a trained person to have a Narcotics Anonymous. Yes?
Great discussion.
Mm-hmm.
But I have one question to ask. In your studies and research, were you able to, or have you come across anything that shows the relation of early and excessive cell phone use on the brain of young children?
Yeah. So excessive cell phone use increases dopamine. excessive cell phone use. Have you ever been away from your phone for long? What do? I never forget, I went to see Hidden Figures and before it came out in the movies, and you're not allowed, it was, what do you call that? Screening? Yeah. I went to a screening of Hidden Figures, so we're not allowed to bring our cell phones. And it was a long line, so I had to stand on line without my cell phone. And I'm like, I feel like I was like scratching. Like I literally had to go back to the car to get the cell phone for a moment, and I realized I was addicted to cell phone. You can be addicted, like I was addicted to my cell phone, and it's seeing in the brain heightened levels of dopamine. And I really believe that it's a terrible thing for our children, actually, because they are getting addicted to something so young. Because it doesn't matter what you're addicted to. When you have high levels of dopamine shot up in your brain like that, right, you have a propensity to addictions of other things. So addiction is a bad thing. Addiction is a bad thing. Anything that causes you to have a toxic amount of dopamine. So the answer is yes. They're starting to see addictive behaviors in children based on cell phone use.
So could that also be contributing to the amount of stress that they're relating to that we don't understand?
Yeah. I believe anything that causes anxiety is a problem, even if it's a cell phone. Anything that causes anxiety, whether it's abuse, trauma, or behaviors that, and they're targeting children. So they target cigarettes to children. People who are hooked on cigarettes in their 20s were because they started smoking as teenagers. A lot of things that people are hooked on is because of what they started as young. If they can get past a certain age without doing it, then they'll have a less propensity for addiction. So you have to protect your children from even excessive abuse of cell phones and tablets. I wouldn't have my children using tablets at 2 years. You see 2-year-olds doing this, and we're like, they're so brilliant. They can switch and they could do all that stuff. And then they get hooked. Yeah, I don't like it. That's my personal opinion based on, and I have seen research that shows heightened amounts of dopamine due to cell phone use excessive. Yeah.
Thanks.
All right, I want to close it. My aunt said we could go on forever. That's what she said, but
Testing.
We can close now. Yeah. Yes.
I know this is kind of a silly question. Can we just get our brain scanned?
No.
Just so we can know,
I wouldn't go as I wouldn't. I don't like to involve. Though I'm a scientist and I do lots of research. I did excessive research on the different things in the brain. I think because the danger is we don't know everything. I think I don't believe in just going and getting your brain scan to see I don't think we know enough.
Oh no, well I would think that you would have a doctor or someone to interpret.
No, I don't think.
For
That's what I
you.
mean. I don't think physicians know enough.
Oh, okay.
I don't think the scientific community. You know how people? What's her name? Jennifer. I can't remember her name, but she prophylactically cut off both her breasts.
Yeah, I know
Angelina
who you're
Jolie,
talking about. Yeah.
based on research.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's dangerous when we start doing certain things based on research because then, I personally believe that when you actively damage breasts, it might trigger something. We're starting to see that. So my point is, this is research that we're seeing. This is issues that we're seeing show up naturally. Let's deal with the issues. Am I saying go into the scientific community and get brain scans and have doctors interpret? I wouldn't go as far as that because I don't think they know enough yet. This is just research.
Well, is there any way, any place that you get so far on that scale that you can't come back? I think that's really my question. We're looking at the brains. You're looking at the children's brain. These are children who were severely abused. Mm-hmm. These are the ones who weren't. At what point is that abuse so much that they can't come back? And is there any way to assess that other than looking at the brain?
I don't know. I think like the extreme damages, there's certain things that you can't come back from in that particular situation. But the brain is so powerful in that something may be damaged here, but you can compensate. You can show resilience. your brain is very powerful. I think we only use a smaller portion of our brain anyway. So even the small brain child can do powerful things, because even the damaged brain child is more powerful than some of the most smartest animals, primates. You get what I'm saying? So I wouldn't say there's no coming back. There might be social issues that we have to understand. So if we see a child that's doing certain things, we say, I understand why they're doing it. And then we can create tools for other parts of the brain to manage that imbalance. But I will never say you can't come back from anything. The brain is so powerful. Yes, lastly? Mm-hmm.
How do wow, it's loud. How do beatings, like not like spankings, but like beatings, affect the what do you say? The brain.
I think excessive abuse, it messes with all parts of the brain. So I'm not gonna say how, but this is one example. When you are perfectionist, a lot of people try to do things to lower their shame. So there's heightened shame. There's heightened shame in individuals that are abused. And there is heightened error correction, meaning they work at it so hard that they try not to make an error, because usually in their childhood, when they made an error, they were severely punished. So they live a life of hypervigilance, excessive perfection, cold, right? Hard-hearted. These are some examples sometimes. Some people are resilient. Some people are resilient, but a lot of the times they see people with heightened amount of shame, lots of shame in their spirit, and a lot of the times they hide it and they keep it inside. That's an example of sometimes what happens to children, to adults who were abused as children physically. Yeah. All right. Thank you, guys. I appreciate the long conversation. It was overdue, but as I said before, let's get some practical stuff going on. Let's put our resources to things that actually help the people of God in a way that they can create tools. They just need tools, not just prayer, but prayer with specific tools and what to how to handle whatever trauma they went through. Amen? Amen. Thank you.
Okay, let us thank Dr. Byfield for that wonderful presentation. I hope you learn a lot and you'll apply it to your life and share it with others. Because that's what it is. When we come to these seminars or workshop, we don't just get it, absorb it, and do nothing about it, right? We put it into action, right? Is that what we're going to do? It's good information, but we need to act on it. We're going to collect our offering right now, and then we'll close out with prayer. Brother Samuel, who's here? Any of the elders are here to close out for the evening? Because usually an elder is assigned. Oh, David? Okay, great. All right. So we're going to collect our offering. Dig deep. And next week, our youth ministry program will be provided by team number 2. We have 2 teams that we set up in the youth ministry program planning team, so they'll be doing our program then. And then on the 16th of March, we're starting our Global Youth Day, where we're going to be going out, and we're going to have a group from New York here, so we want to keep that in mind, spread the word. If you know any young people out there that hasn't been coming to church, we needed to invite them to come out during the week for our week of prayer. It's very important. I'm going to keep on talking about it until the date. And I want you to talk about it consistently with your friends, your neighbors, and everyone. Are you going to do that for us? This is not going to be a regular, ordinary week of prayer. It's going to be a week of prayer. It's power-filled, and we're going to come out and praise the Lord. I know you're looking at me like, yes, Sister Darnett, we're hearing you, but I want you to act. Here's the thing. We come, we hear people speak to us, we share with you, and you do nothing about it. Let's put things into action. Like Sister Byfield said, Dr. Byfield said this evening, we don't want to just talk about it. We want to write about it, act on it, and we want to do what God wants us to do about it. Isn't that what we want to do? Yeah, that's what we want to do. Okay. Thank you for the offering. Okay, Brother David, want to come up, and then we'll just close up with prayer for the offering and close out too.
All right, let us stand for prayer. Let us pray. Our kind and righteous God, we thank you for a day spent in your courts. We thank you for allowing us to experience your love and your mercies so that we felt the need to come and worship you. And we're thankful to you that once we came to worship, that we were blessed, that you were here with us, that you provided us with food for the oncoming week, that you provided us with blessings and strength to survive this coming week. Now we ask that you'll go with us. Help us in all that we do, say and think, that through this week we pray, dear Father, that the fellowship that we felt, that the information that we got, the inspiration that we felt through this day might carry us through the next week and help to prepare us for heaven. Bless this offering. We pray that you'll help that it might be used for your name's honor and glory. Take us through this week in love, in peace, and in joy, we pray. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.